Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Energy Perspectives podcast, brought to you by Energy Dialogues.
Welcome to another episode of Energy Perspectives podcasts, coming to you from Washington, D.C. Very excited to have with me two esteemed guests here, Sarah Delille from the Vice President of Equinor's U.S. country management, and Amy Cradic, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Strategy and Sustainability at New Jersey Resources. We're here to talk to you a little bit today about innovation and how companies from across the natural gas supply chain are rising to the moment to address market forces as well as policy opportunities to address emission reductions in a time of growing electric load. So I'm going to turn it over to both of these folks to introduce themselves first, starting with Sarah, and then we'll go to Amy.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm Sarah Delille, head of country management for Equinor in the US. And Equinor is an energy company with headquarters in Norway. We are across all value chains, so we produce oil, gas, renewables, carbon capture and storage, even lithium. So we are across different value chains, and we are also looking into new ones.
Excellent.
Great. Amy Cradic from New Jersey Resources. We're a Fortune 1000 energy infrastructure company. We're on several areas of the natural gas value chain as well as renewables. We have a core utility, which serves about 600,000 customers. And we've been in the renewable business now for about 15 years on the solar side. We're in 6 states. We have some salt cavern storage assets on the natural gas side in Mississippi. And several years ago, we purchased an oil pipeline going into industrial Philadelphia that we converted to natural gas, which has had a good emissions profile and story as well. So natural gas and renewables, we sit on both sides.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as we started out, the word innovation is a word that gets tossed around in Washington and all across the country and the world here. And we're seeing different forces driving some of that innovation drivers change. In particular, we've seen a lot, the last 4 years in the US, we've seen a lot in the policy levers. We've seen tax incentives, we've seen policy drivers pushing a lot of new regulations, new opportunities to advance sustainable solutions. And we're potentially entering a different paradigm now where you're going to see market forces coming up against us, as well as a policy outlook that looks a little bit different. Juxtaposing that, and those topics are electric load growth and the rise in demand across the country, across the world, driven by data centers and AI and digital infrastructure. You're seeing a lot of new players come in to the scene who are going to be relying on the natural gas system, the existing system, to function properly, as well as new technologies. Some of these companies who are trying to pioneer some of these new technologies, how they can be a more active role and play a more active participant in that opportunity going forward. So, my question for you guys to first start off with, you both are leaders in demonstrating innovative technologies. In your view, in this new environment, which cutting edge and scalable technologies hold the greatest potential to drive significant reductions in both the near and long term? And how can their adoption be accelerated, particularly as we look to this new environment where we're going to be relying less on regulatory levers and more on market levers? I'll start. Sarah.
That's a really good question, and we can speak about it for a really, really long time. First starting with regulations versus innovation and versus market. Looking into Equinor, we have been using the tax line in our financial models for many, many years. So the carbon tax in Norway started in 1991. Wow. So regulations. Exactly. So regulations have been, of course, a big part of this. But what really helped us as a company is that we went into renewables. We included the carbon tax very early on. That means that we were able to do a lot of projects and now gain a lot of competitive advantage and economies of scale. One example of that is offshore wind. So Equinor has many projects in offshore wind in Europe. We are also having a big project here in the US. And the fact that we have been doing this for many years really gave us a competitive advantage. Then going back to your question, short-term versus long-term in terms of innovation. And specifically to oil and gas production, there are a lot of things that we can do short term that will be extremely useful to reduce emissions going forward. One of them is, of course, having a good way to detect methane and stop the methane leaks. I think that's the first one. And here we could use AI, we could use drones. There are so many different ways to do it in an efficient manner. There is also something we could do about flaring. So gas recovery, instead of flaring it, we actually use it, we compress it, and then we could just use it as an LNG or use it to power other part of our oil and gas production systems. So this is the short term. Then on the long term, of course, we have direct air capture, we have CCS, hydrogen, and so many other things that they are not long term in terms of they're already starting now, but they will be able to get scaled in the long term, given the right incentives, given the technology to be able to make it more efficient and reduce cost.
Love that. I want to come back to a couple of things you said, but I want to make sure Amy has a...
Yes, sure. I'll take it all the way down to the utility space and get into people's homes somewhat. New Jersey, where our utility sits, is a pretty aggressive global warming response act with 2050 targets. And we've been leading in this space with proof of concept pilot projects, because as a utility, where you're at customer's home and they're worried about share of wallet from an energy transition perspective, we try to look at it from an affordability and a reliability perspective while achieving those emission reductions. And in utility space also, it matters what type of infrastructure you have and where you sit. What's the type of building stock that you're serving? What are your customers? Socioeconomic factors matter. The state of our infrastructure, we're highly upgraded. We serve about 600,000 customers, which I'd mentioned before. No cast iron, no bare steel left. So we're uniquely situated to look at innovation in renewable and clean fuels. We're the first utility, or one of the first in the country, to do blending of green, clean hydrogen off of solar assets. We're also looking at geothermal opportunities and researching that. Our Board of Public Utilities is letting us look at hybrid systems where you take highly efficient electric end-use appliances as well as with your efficient gas furnaces, and how does that drive down emissions, but be really sensitive to customer costs. So, depending where you are and the type of customers you have, that innovation has to be tailored to what you're doing without losing the reliability and the affordability aspect of the market trends and the policy conversation kind of merging.
Energy Dialogues invites you to join industry leaders, investors, policymakers, regulators, and innovators on December 1st through 3rd for the North American Gas Forum. The forum, taking place in Washington, D.C., will provide attendees with a unique opportunity to participate in crucial discussions on the future of natural gas, LNG, and the broader energy landscape. For more information or to register, please visit energy-dialogues.com/NAGF. Again, that's energy-dialogues.com/NAGF. See you there.
So building off of those conversations around supply chain, barriers to innovation and opportunities to innovation, it's interesting, you both sit in a different part of the natural gas supply chain. You're upstream and have a lot of different businesses. As Equinor, you're a global company. New Jersey Resources is delivering gas to the front lines, to residential customers, to industrial customers. They want a product increasingly that has emissions characteristics that are verifiable and that are aligned with sort of the what the customer wants. Some customers want the basic, affordable, reliable option. Some more sophisticated customers may actually be looking for these types of data-driven advanced methane technologies that Equinor and other companies are utilizing. How do you find the way to work together on these things? Because from my vantage point, there's always these silos within the industry at a time when we're trying to deliver a product to the customer that is also competing with increasing renewables and increasing load growth. How do you deliver a package that can capture that moment of that customer in a way that rewards your behavior upstream, but also incentivizes your behavior downstream.
The one thing I would say is I'm not sure we're competing with renewables. I think we're really supportive of renewables at scale. We're on the solar business again for the last 15 years, and they each have positive assets and attributes, and I think they complement each other more than compete. As far as a good message across the value chain, I think we're there. I think everyone is bought into emission reductions. I think the political landscape is not going to change that momentum. What I do think from a market perspective that has changed is that there were really quick single solutions early on. We're going to electrify everything. We're going to decommission. We no longer want the pipeline system. And that's kind of moderated out because what we're seeing is a supply and demand issue, growing power demand, as you mentioned, for the first time in a decade. They're starting to be a little bit like maybe we need it all to meet the demand. And then how do you take that infrastructure, which we've highly invested in, and leverage it? How does it evolve? Does it play a different role? Can it run cleaner fuels? What role does it play from a long duration storage perspective? We're deeply penetrated from an underground infrastructure perspective in our New Jersey service territory, 85% served. That is not an asset that you want to get rid of. That's an asset that you want to figure out how do you leverage it to run cleaner systems and meet emission reduction goals, but save customer cost, right? We're already built, we're already paid for. How do you complement that with renewables, with nuclear, with more electricity? All of it's going to work together to meet demand, to your point. Demand's only going up. What are the assets that we have to get us there in a reliable and, very importantly, an affordable way?
Yep. Well said.
Compliment a bit. I think you covered the customer part really well. We don't compete. We are actually looking into synergies between these different value chains. So even synergies in the workforce. So I mentioned carbon capture and storage, and we have amazing subsurface people, engineers in our organization who are able to work both in oil and gas, but also carbon capture and storage. We have our trading unit that could trade oil and gas, could also trade synthetic fuels, but could also look into trading power as well. So the synergies between these different value chain is extremely important, and we are actually leveraging those synergies. And the other thing, you covered the customer really well, but then looking into the investors. A company I work for, Equinor, who is a Norwegian-owned company, has investors from Europe, and of course also American investors. But there are a lot of investors who would like to see those emissions being reduced, and how do we do that while still bringing value to those shareholders? So that's a dilemma. And we still have our net zero by 2050. So the what is there is more about the how. How do we get there while delivering value? And we have all these challenges with supply chain, inflation, geopolitical challenges. How do we continue delivering value to our investors while still reducing emissions?
And so what are out of those challenges that you listed, which are all very real, what's the biggest one that you see like rising to the top? And from your vantage point too, as a gas utility, what's the hardest job you have to kind of push some of these innovations into the system? Because you have a very different policy environment than an upstream regulator does, or upstream company does.
Yeah, I spent 25 years on the government side before I moved to NJR about 7 years ago. Regulatory frameworks are not all that agile. And when you start talking about innovation, you've got to figure out a way to work with your regulators to account for that. If you're going to utilize your infrastructure in a different way, if you need costs and how they're transferred to the customer, they still need to be prudent, but maybe, again, you have a different tariff or you have different regulatory frameworks. So that takes a lot of communication. That's a challenge, right? So you're innovating and trying to push ahead, and you live within a framework that business as usual has been rewarded because of the reliability factor. And so you've just got to work together. You got to communicate. I think that's one of the things that Energy Dialogues does well. It brings us all together with our government representatives so that we can understand we want to get there. We want to deliver the emission reductions. We need to work together in order to make that happen.
Well said. And Same. I mean, different view from you guys. I mean, just how do you view the challenge there?
It's really similar as well. I mean, you have the regulation permitting, which really can be a bottleneck if they are not really streamlined. But there's a lot to really work on as an industry and cross industries. So when we were doing mainly oil and gas, what we saw is that we did a lot of partnerships with companies that look like us. So we look at Chevron and Oxy and BP and Shell. Now, what we see is that we are having partnership cross industries to reduce emissions. So you have traditional oil and gas companies having partnership with steel, concrete companies to be able to reduce emissions together. So we see a lot of partnership happening, and that is great because nobody can solve this alone. Yeah. We need to be able to have these partnerships. The other thing that we are also doing is all this clean tech that is, emerging, and they have an amazing advantage of being agile. Small companies can really go much faster than any big company can go. And what we do in Equinor is that we invest in these companies, and we usually have a seat at their board. So just in the US, Equinor invested almost $300 million in tech companies, either because they are able to help us reduce emissions, or they are working on a technology that could be completely disrupting the whole energy industry, like fusion, for example. So I think it's all of the above type of answer here. So making sure that the regulations, permitting, and all that is set in place, making sure that we have the right partnership, but also helping those new technologies emerge and help energy companies decarbonize.
So to that end, I mean, are there any key catalysts that you would say going into the future driving traditional oil and gas leaders to pioneer these alternative energy solutions? I mean, are the trends more, load growth focused just to meet demand now? Are they decarbonization focused? Are they deliverability focused? I mean, there's not one answer to that question, but yet they all kind of blend together because, to your point, Amy, that you've got customers care about affordable and reliable first and foremost. Then if you can't deliver that, then you're not delivering on your mission. But increasingly, the pressures are on to do all these things and to bring in these outside players to the oil and gas system and to take their expertise, but driving that through the system can be very daunting when it's highly regulated. And so the key catalyst for driving innovation in your mind, to kind of go full circle, is it policy or is it market? Or is it a combination that still needs to be sorted out?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I think we went really hard policy for a little while that was trying to push us in a single direction. And then you felt the market forces of that. You got out of sync with supply and demand. And now you have real reliability problems. And then you saw, because you had a supply and demand imbalance, you saw affordability come into significant concern. And so I think you need both. You need the market forces, but you need the policy to be flexible and open pathways. We say that a lot. That's part of a lot of how we communicate. Leave open pathways. Let us invest. Incremental improvements and progress will lead us to short and long-term solutions. And so, both of them have to work together. You have to acknowledge your market forces, and you have to have policy that is also agile and responds to those things. Blind policy and blind markets might not get us to the end goal, but I think if they work together, we definitely, have a path forward.
And also, it depends on what's happening geopolitically. I mean, if you just remember a few years ago when we had the war in Europe, suddenly, making sure that Europe and the rest of the world are still having energy was number one priority. Yep. So
it changed the dynamic here.
It changed the whole dynamic.
Very fast.
Equinor provides 20% of all gas needs to Europe. Wow. And when the war started in Ukraine, we started, producing as much as possible to be able to deliver those amount of gas that Europe needs. But at the same time, we were saying, okay, well, wait, we also need to make sure that we reduce emissions. So it's really something that you need to adjust along the way, not only with regulations and what's happening with the supply chain and the different markets, but also looking at geopolitical situation and how is that helping or not helping the efforts to reduce emissions.
Yeah, it does drive a different undercurrent on sort of the realities of deliverability of gas, but also you can't do this in the vacuum of not being aware of the geopolitical forces here that are at play, and that the U.S.'s role in particular in driving so much of this oil and gas production overseas as well through exports. Just to kind of round it out and close, like what's the one thing that excites you the most about your current job and the innovation that your company is doing for where you think the future holds? Like is there one area that is super exciting to you that you're excited to see what the next 4 years looks like? Would love.
Yeah, it's unprecedented time for innovation, right? Yeah. I mean, our industry, like I said, we were rewarded for business as usual, to reliability, affordability, prudent spending. And now we're carbon capture all the way down into the small commercial. No one would have contemplated that, but for the energy transition. So for us, there's new places to invest. It's a pretty exciting time. Innovation in a utility, those really weren't things that were talked about in the same space. So we're excited to lead, and it's a great time to be in the energy sector in general.
Fantastic, yes. Yes.
I say likewise, the innovation is just amazing right now, and we didn't talk a lot about AI unless the need of data centers. But AI itself and digital twins, it's going to have a huge impact on the way we produce energy, the efficiency that we can get from our assets, reducing emissions, and just being able to do predictive maintenance. All of that, we are able to apply it to oil and gas, to renewable, to CCS. And that is just growing exponentially. So I'm super excited about what AI will also do to the whole energy transition and energy production.
Yeah, and there's not enough focus on that upside. There's a lot of focus on the load growth and the energy needs, and not enough on what it can actually do to be utilized. And I think you guys are a proof point of both deploying these tools in different ways that will allow your business to be more efficient, create more, be highly productive, but also help with the innovation agendas that are so important and central to meeting energy goals, meeting climate goals, and doing it in a way that is hopeful, bipartisan, and has receptivity in various parts of the country that we think are all looking for these things: affordable, reliability, and increasingly cleaner. So excellent job. I look forward to further discussions with both of you, and appreciate the time today. And thank you for joining us on another edition of the Energy Perspectives podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Energy Perspectives podcast. We hope you enjoyed this engaging conversation. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you never miss out on an episode of the Energy Perspectives. For more information on Energy Dialogues, please visit energy-dialogues.com. Until next time.